They tell you spiritual awakening is about peace, light, and transcendence. Jung discovered the opposite. The final stage is not about becoming holy. It is about becoming whole. And that terrifies the human mind more than anything else. This transformation requires a sacrifice most people refuse to make. Not the sacrifice of your vices or your ego, but the sacrifice of your innocence itself. Most seekers stop at what feels good. They meditate, they practice gratitude, they surround themselves with positive affirmations. They mistake the aesthetic stage for the real thing. Jung called this spiritual bypassing before the term even existed. He watched patient after patient reach what they thought was enlightenment, only to discover they had built a prison of light around their darkness. The real journey had not even begun. Jung documented something dangerous in his private notes. Some patients broke through to the final stage. Others broke down completely. The difference was not intelligence or willpower. It was their capacity to endure what he called the great despair. The moment when your entire life stops making sense, when every achievement feels hollow, when every relationship reveals itself as performance. This is not depression. This is awakening to the fact that you have been living someone else's life. Understanding what Jung discovered requires going back to where it all began. In his clinical practice in Zurich, Jung encountered individuals who had done everything right. They had successful careers, they had loving families, they had followed every rule society gave them. Yet they sat in his office describing a profound emptiness that no achievement could fill. These were not depressed people in the clinical sense. They were people whose souls were suffocating under the weight of a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt dead from the inside. Jung realized these patients were experiencing what he would later call the dark night of the soul. But this was not a poetic metaphor. This was a psychological crucible that either destroyed people or transformed them into something beyond what modern psychology could explain. He began documenting patterns, specific stages that appeared again and again in those who successfully navigated this treacherous territory. What made Jung's discovery so dangerous was this realization. The final stage of awakening is not safe. It is not comfortable. It does not happen in meditation retreats or spiritual workshops. It happens in the wreckage of your old life. It happens when everything you built collapses. It happens when you can no longer maintain the illusion that you are who you pretend to be. The final descent begins with the collapse of the persona. You have spent decades building a social mask, the good child, the successful professional, the spiritual seeker. The mask fits so perfectly that you forgot it was a mask at all. Then one day, without warning, the mask cracks. You find yourself unable to perform the rituals that once defined you. The job that gave you identity feels meaningless. The spiritual practices that brought peace feel empty. Friends who once energized you now drain you completely. Jung called this the death of the false self, but it does not feel like rebirth. It feels like annihilation. You become a stranger in your own life. People sense something has changed. They ask if you are okay. You say yes, because the truth is too disturbing to speak. The truth is that you are watching your entire identity dissolve, and you cannot stop it. You are alone in a way you have never been alone before. This isolation is not an accident. It is preparation for what comes next. Your persona was not just a mask you wore. It was a defense system protecting you from the most terrifying truth of human existence. That beneath the social facade, beneath the achievements and the roles and the stories you tell yourself, there is a darkness you have spent your entire life running from. Jung called this darkness the shadow. The second phase is the confrontation with the shadow. This is where most people turn back, because the shadow is not just your flaws or your mistakes. The shadow is the realization that you are capable of every evil you have ever judged in others. every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of cowardice. Jung discovered that we project our darkness onto the world to avoid seeing it in ourselves. We call others manipulative to avoid our own manipulation. We condemn others as selfish to deny our own selfishness. Let me be clear about what this means. The person you judged for lying, you are that person. The friend who betrayed you, you contain that capacity. The narcissist who used you, that lives in your shadow. Every quality you despise in others exists in you, not as potential, as reality. You have already done these things, maybe not in action, but in thought, in desire, in the secret chambers of your mind where you allow yourself to be who you really are. The final stage forces you to withdraw every projection. You stop blaming your parents, you stop blaming your partner, you stop blaming society. You look in the mirror and see the truth. You are not a victim of darkness. You are darkness pretending to be light. This is the hardest step because it destroys your moral superiority. You can no longer be the good person who judges the bad people. You must become the whole person who contains both saint and sinner. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Jung documented how this realization manifests. His patients would describe moments of shocking clarity. They would remember a time they manipulated someone and disguised it as help. A time they hurt someone and called it honesty. A time they abandoned someone and called it boundaries. The shadow does not reveal itself as evil. It reveals itself as everything you did while believing you were good. This is why most spiritual seekers never reach this stage. They have invested too much in being good. Their entire identity is built on being more evolved, more conscious, more enlightened than others. The shadow destroys this identity completely. It shows you that you are not more evolved. You are just better at hiding your darkness. You are not more conscious. You are just more skilled at denial. You are not more enlightened. You are just more convinced of your own superiority. If you have felt this realization tear through your chest like a blade, you are not broken. You are breaking through. But the pain does not end here. In fact, it intensifies. The shadow confrontation is only the beginning. The third phase is the death of the ego. Not the spiritual teacher version where you transcend your ego through meditation. The brutal version where the part of you that wants to be special dies screaming. Your ego is not just vanity or pride. Your ego is the structure that makes sense of chaos. It is the part that says, I am this and not that. I am good and not evil. I am enlightened and not ignorant. Jung documented this phase as psychological death. His patients described feeling like they were dying, but their bodies kept living. Everything they identified with disappeared. Their achievements meant nothing. Their knowledge meant nothing. Their spiritual progress meant nothing. They were left with nothing but raw existence. No story, no meaning, no purpose. Just the terrifying freedom of being alive without knowing why. One of Jung's patients described it this way. I woke up one morning and realized I had no idea who I was. Not in a curious way, in a terrifying way. My name felt like a word without meaning. My face in the mirror looked like a stranger. My entire life felt like a story someone else had written, and I had been forced to perform. I could not remember why I had chosen my career, why I had married my spouse, why I had any of the beliefs I claimed to hold. Everything was revealed as arbitrary, random, meaningless. This is the void that spiritual teachers warn you about, but never prepare you for. This is the existential crisis that cannot be solved by affirmations or meditation. This is the moment where you realize that everything you thought was real is just a construction. Your personality is a construction. Your values are a construction. Your entire sense of self is a story you have been telling yourself to avoid the terror of being nobody. Most people cannot tolerate this void. They rush back to identity. They become someone new, a different mask, a better story. They mistake this new identity for awakening, but they have only rearranged the furniture in their prison. The truly awakened do not rush to fill the void. They sit in it. They let the death complete itself. They accept that they are nothing, nobody, no fixed thing that can be named or claimed or defended. Jung called this ego death, but he was careful to distinguish it from psychosis or mental breakdown. In psychosis, the ego shatters and chaos floods in. In true ego death, the ego dissolves and spaciousness remains. You are not losing your mind. You are losing your identification with your mind. You are not going insane. You are waking up from the insanity of believing you are the voice in your head. This phase can last weeks, months, even years. Jung documented patients who spent entire seasons in this liminal space, unable to go back to who they were, unable to move forward into anything new, suspended between death and rebirth. And here is what Jung discovered that most psychologists still refuse to acknowledge. This is not pathology. This is transformation. The caterpillar must dissolve completely before the butterfly can emerge. There is no shortcut through the dissolution. Then comes the fourth phase, the union of opposites. You are no longer trying to be good. You are integrating the fact that you are both light and shadow, both creation and destruction, both love and hate. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not becoming a better person, becoming a complete person, a whole person. And here is why this is dangerous. A whole person cannot be manipulated. They see through every game because they know every game. They have played them all themselves. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. The individuated person is not nice. They are kind. Niceness is performance. Kindness is authentic. They do not smile when they are angry. They do not agree when they disagree. They do not pretend to care about things that bore them. They have dropped every social script that requires them to be less than honest. This makes people deeply uncomfortable. The individuated person sets boundaries that seem brutal to those who are used to using them. They say no without explanation. They leave conversations that drain them. They cut contact with toxic people without guilt. They refuse to participate in family dysfunction. They will not enable your victim story. They will not rescue you from consequences. They will not pretend your behavior is acceptable to keep the peace. This is not cruelty. This is wholeness. When you have integrated your shadow, you know that enabling others prevents their growth. When you have died to your ego, you no longer need people to like you. When you have united your opposites, you can be both fierce and gentle, depending on what the moment requires. You are no longer bound by the need to be consistent. You are free to be appropriate. Jung observed something fascinating about people who reached this stage. They developed what he called a dangerous presence. Not dangerous as in violent. Dangerous as in they could see through every mask. They could feel every lie. They could sense every manipulation before it was fully formed. And they could not be fooled anymore. Not by others. Not by themselves. This makes them terrible dinner guests at normal social functions. Small talk becomes unbearable because they see the dance of egos beneath every conversation. Networking becomes impossible because they cannot pretend to care about connections that are purely transactional. Dating becomes bizarre because they see through every performance in the first 5 minutes. They know who you are beneath your presentation, and they do not need you to be anything other than that. A whole person is not trying to transcend their humanity. They have accepted it completely. They know they are selfish and generous, cruel and compassionate, wise and foolish. They do not try to be only the good parts. They own all of it. This ownership creates a kind of power that cannot be taught or faked. It is the power of being real in a world that rewards performance. This is the transformation that most seekers avoid, because being whole means giving up the identity of being a good person. It means accepting that you contain murder and sainthood, betrayal and loyalty, cowardice and courage. You are not one or the other. You are the tension between opposites. This makes you unpredictable. It makes you ungovernable. It makes you free. But Jung discovered something even more profound. The people who reached this final stage stopped caring about awakening. They stopped caring about enlightenment. They stopped caring about being special or evolved or different from others. They simply were. They existed without needing existence to mean anything. They lived without needing life to have purpose. They loved without needing love to last forever. The final stage is the return. After the descent into darkness, after the death of the ego, after the union of opposites, you come back to the world, but you are not the person who left. Jung described this as the return of the hero. But the hero is not celebrated. The hero is feared, because you now see what others cannot see. You feel what others cannot feel. You know what others refuse to know. You are calm in chaos because you have been to the bottom. You are dangerous in the best way, because you cannot be threatened with loss. You have already lost everything. You cannot be seduced by power because you know power is illusion. You cannot be corrupted by pleasure because you know pleasure is temporary. You have become what the awakened empath becomes. Impossible to manipulate, impossible to control, impossible to break. The struggle stops not because you fixed yourself, but because you accepted yourself. You do not fight the shadow anymore. You do not deny the darkness. You integrate it, you become it, and in becoming it, you transcend it. This is the paradox Jung discovered. The only way to become light is to become darkness first. The only way to become whole is to shatter completely. The only way to awaken is to die while still breathing. People who reach this stage describe a strange peace. Not the peace of having everything figured out. The peace of knowing you will never figure it out. Not the peace of achieving enlightenment. The peace of realizing there is nothing to achieve. Not the peace of becoming whole. The peace of realizing you were always whole and the fragmentation was just a story. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he knew the cost. Most people will never pay it. They will live and die in the persona. They will project their shadow until their last breath. They will cling to their ego even as it suffocates them. They will never reach the final stage because the final stage requires something most humans cannot give. The willingness to be nobody, the courage to be nothing, the strength to let everything you thought you would die so that everything you actually are can be born. This path is not for the many. It is for the few who cannot turn back, the ones who have seen too much, the ones who have felt too deeply, the ones who cannot pretend anymore. If you are reading this and your chest feels tight, you are one of them. You are in the descent. You are in the blackening. You are in the death that precedes rebirth. Let me tell you what Jung never wrote in his published works, but recorded in his private journals. He went through this process himself. His confrontation with the unconscious from 1913 to 1919 was his own descent into the final stage. He documented visions and dreams that would have gotten him committed to an asylum if he had shared them publicly. He experienced the death of his professional identity, the dissolution of his ego, the terrifying freedom of no longer knowing who he was. And he came back changed. If you read Jung's work before and after his dark night, you can feel the difference. Before, he was a brilliant psychologist. After, he was something else, a mystic, a prophet, a man who had been to the underworld and returned with knowledge that could not be spoken directly. He spent the rest of his life trying to create maps for others, trying to leave breadcrumbs so that those who followed would not feel so alone in the darkness. But he knew the truth. The final stage cannot be taught. It can only be lived. No book can prepare you, and no teacher can guide you. No technique can shortcut the process. You must go through it yourself. You must feel the terror yourself. You must die yourself. And you must be willing to do it without any guarantee that you will come back. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are not going backwards. You are going through the final stage, the stage most people never reach, the stage Jung called individuation, the stage where you stop being who they told you to be and become who you actually are. This is the most dangerous journey because there is no map. There is no guru who can walk it for you. There is only you and the darkness and the slow, terrifying realization that the darkness is you. But on the other side of this darkness is something most people never experience. Freedom, real freedom. Not the freedom to do what you want, the freedom to be what you are, without apology, without explanation, without needing anyone to understand. You become the thing Jung spent his entire life trying to explain. The self, the totality, the union of all opposites, the end of the war between who you are and who you think you should be. And here is what no one tells you about reaching the final stage. Life does not become easier. You do not transcend human problems. You still feel pain. You still experience loss. You still get angry and sad and afraid. But your relationship to these experiences transforms completely. You are no longer identified with them. You feel them fully without becoming them. You experience emotions as weather passing through, intense, real, temporary. The individuated person does not bypass pain with spiritual concepts. They feel it completely. But they do not make stories about it. They do not ask, why me? They do not search for meaning. They simply allow pain to be pain, grief to be grief, fear to be fear. And in that allowance, something miraculous happens. The emotions move through faster. They do not get stuck. They do not become trauma. They become experience. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold two opposites simultaneously without needing to resolve them. You can be devastated and okay at the same time. You can be afraid and courageous at the same time. You can be uncertain and confident at the same time. You are no longer trying to be one thing. You are the spaciousness that contains all things. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.